Today is Wednesday, June 21st. The time is 3:34 p.m. I call to order the Committee of the Whole meeting of the Birmingham City Council. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Thank you, councilors, administration, staff, and our invited guests. Thank you so much. At this time, councilors, you do have attached the minutes of our previous meeting of May 17th. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to review it, and if I could entertain a motion and a second for approval of those minutes. For approval. Second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Those minutes of May 17th for Committee of the Whole are approved. At this time, councilors, if you'll draw your attention to today's agenda, we have a presentation this afternoon from our presiding judge of the municipal court, Judge Andre Sparks, as well as other departments within the city of Birmingham. Today's meeting is devoted solely to code enforcement and the environmental court. And we have presentations by each of the Department of Planning, Engineering Permits, Code Enforcement, Office of the City Attorney, and Municipal Court to update us. I know we've had a lot of conversation about code enforcement and just things that go on in our environmental court and how we'd like to just get this update. So we appreciate the mayor's staff, municipal court, everyone for working with us to bring this information. I'm going to turn the meeting over to Judge Sparks. Thank you, Judge Sparks. They've asked that if you could sit close to the mic, or maybe if you could hold the mic by hand.
Next to Councilor Quinn would be good.
Next to Councilor Quinn would be okay?
Let's see.
I'll turn it over to Judge Sparks, our presiding judge.
All right, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
It's great to see you. Thank you, Council President Alexander, for inviting us. As much as I like to be able to give you all this information, it's going to take a collaborative approach for us to do it, and so you're going to hear from 3 departments from the city. As soon as I finish talking, Artemis Lewis, the Deputy Director of the Code Enforcement Division, is going to come and represent code enforcement. We also have our city attorney here, who is going to represent the Office of City Attorney. We have heard your concerns. We have been meeting, and I want to thank you for allowing us to go back and do a deep dive into the processes that we've been using. There's some things that we're going to tell you that will be informative and educational, but we'll also give you some how we move forward information, we think.
Thank you, and just to stop you, Counselor, we do have a presentation that's PowerPoint, and then we can provide copies later. That's okay, Judge.
We also have with us, we have a copy of what we call the top 100 code violations that we want to give you. We've got them broken down by council districts.
And I believe you sent that to us by email.
We have a copy of it right now.
Okay.
And we can give a digital copy to you as well.
Okay.
So our staff will come over and give each counselor the ones from their districts out of that 100. Of course, it's not totally encompassing, but just those 100 cases that the code enforcement team identified as being worthy of note. When we complete this, we'll have obviously question and answer, but we'll also do a best practices conversation about how we move forward. So this time we can turn it over to Artemis and we'll start off.
Good afternoon. My name is Artemis Willis. I serve as Deputy Director for Code Enforcement for the Department of Planning, Engineering, and Permits. This is a newly created division within PEP to establish and implement better processes and business practices that allow code enforcement efforts across the city to be more unified and better coordinated. That are attractive and maintained. They also may review elimination of blight, vacant and abandoned properties, more efficient code enforcement, CETA certified experience when engaging with cities at all levels. Yes.
What is CETA?
Our core values. It's the core values of the city: customer service, efficiency, effectiveness, transparency, and accountability.
This is a list of common violations we've consistently addressed. There are not any in particular order, but we all can agree that there are nuisances that which need to be addressed, which is overgrown vacant lots, inoperable vehicles, trash dumping, litter, dilapidated structures, outside storage, junk properties, parking violations, various zoning violations, which include business use of residential property. This slide kind of describes the process. We first received complaints or notice of violation via multiple sources. When we received the complaint, we perform an inspection to confirm the violations, send violation notice, and wait for a call or return certified letter green card. Then after we wait, we don't hear from the property owner, then we re-inspect the property to see if it has been abated. If it has been abated, then we close the case. If it hasn't been abated, then we move forward with the next process. The highlighted violation, next, okay, good. The highlighted violations are abated by City Council, declaring them a public nuisance. A third-party vendor is contracted to abate the property. The other violations are housing, maintenance, junkyard, zoning violations, which go through municipal court for fines and penalties for non-compliance. Municipal court cannot mandate abatement of the property, therefore certain problem cases are better resolved in circuit court. For non-compliant cases not routed to City Council for third-party abatement. After the second inspection, the following steps are followed to proceed to environmental court. A deposition is done, court date is scheduled, service, and a court hearing is set. Many of our problem cases are not resolved quickly due to these challenges. Widespread lack of awareness of property owner responsibilities, identifying responsible parties, notice are ignored or come back undelivered, violations are not corrected due to confusion, lack of resources, ignorance of the law, ignoring summons for court, and do not show up for court. The next slide is a property dashboard that we're working on in our PEP. This dashboard will identify the 100 cases and also provide updates and photos as we move forward through the process.
I have a question about that.
Yes, ma'am.
You say photos of the violation.
Yes, actual pictures of the properties.
Do you need permission to do that?
Yeah.
No? Okay. I'm making sure.
Okay. Code enforcement next steps is complete that top 100 public-facing dashboard, strategically drive compliance on problem properties, and coordinate with OPI for a robust educational campaign. And I pass it on.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
So now we will be talking about the Office of the City Attorney and our role as the prosecution team and what we do for criminal remedies for environmental court. Next slide, please. So OCA relies on a partnership with several divisions, as you can see in our PowerPoint, such as within code enforcement, such as housing, zoning, and environmental. Results of those investigations are then presented to the magistrate for a probable cause determination. Summons are then prepared for service on the defendant. Next slide. Summons are then issued by the magistrate with a specific date and time for the defendant to appear. This is the defendant's first setting on the matter. Summons have to be properly served by, and this is key, an A-post certified law enforcement officer to be deemed what is called effective service. Once the defendant is served and the first appearance date has been set, the defendant will be advised of the violations alleged against him or her. Next slide. The defendant will then see photographs and hear testimony from the city's inspector about such things as the condition of the property, the number of site visits, and what is absolutely necessary to bring the property into compliance. The OCA prosecutor then evaluates the case and makes a recommendation to the court, which sometimes includes fines and/or jail time based on the code enforcement staff's investigation. Next slide. The defendant is initially given a time frame to fix the property, which typically lasts between 30 up to 60 days. The court resets the matter far enough out to allow for proper repairs and other corrective measures to occur. Next slide. Our next steps. So because these environmental cases are increasing every day, what we have done is we have created the OCA Environmental Court Team, which consists of 3 prosecuting attorneys, 2 court service law enforcement officers that are, again, as you saw in the earlier slide, APOST certified officers certified to assist BPD to serve summons in environmental court and to also assist our drug and nuisance abatement team. We will have a designated paralegal. As all of you are aware, we have prevailed, OCA has prevailed on several civil actions in circuit court involving these drug nuisance properties. That concludes our presentation.
I want to try to bring you back a little bit and walk you through the process just a little bit so you understand from a complaint file. Can you go back on the slides for me, please? About
Well, it asked if we could go through, but, yeah, go ahead.
No, it's really more to the administration. So currently, we only have 2 APOST officers. So for the positions that we're trying to fill, does that include another APOST officer? Because I know we only have 2 code enforcement officers that can do that.
Yes, so it does. It's a part of what HR and Joe Dyson, who's transitioning into a new role. That's exactly what we're looking to do.
Okay, just one.
One, yes.
Go back on.
So while we're asking,
Council Williams? Yes.
while we're asking the question, so, and this goes to the A-post issue, and then also goes to the 30 and 60-day once in court issue, is why can we not have BPD in charge of code enforcement, a division of BPD, I'm not saying put it on Patrol Bureau, where every single time there's a violation, it is written up by an A-post officer, therefore there is not the need to have service by A-post, they have to show up for court or pay the fine on their own, and also, it solves a lot of issues instead of giving that 30 to 60 day gap, as well as a gap prior to that for them to have to show up to court.
So, Council, I don't think there's anything at this point that prevents it besides resource availability. So that's a part of what that team is doing. So we'll take that back and let them vet to see if there are any challenges. I don't see why that wouldn't be an option, aside from resource availability, resource of officers. But we'll vet that. That's a fair recommendation.
The optimal way to deal with these violations is by voluntary compliance. And so the code enforcement team's first line of dealing with citizens when there's a violation is to give them the opportunity to resolve it. The only reason we get into this process is because citizens either can't or refuse to resolve the issue. And so once a complaint is filed and the inspection goes forward, there's a violation notice provided to the citizen. The citizen is then given the opportunity to resolve the complaint. As we say, it's usually a 45 to 90 day time period for them to get involved. It depends on what the complaint is. It may not take that long. If it's just grass being cut, then it doesn't take that long. But once the re-inspection is done and the compliance has not been taken care of, that's when we go into the compliance unit. Can you move forward, please? We can shorten whatever time you want, but shortening the time doesn't involve allowing compliance, because some people don't have the resources immediately. But from our standards, we require them to be in compliance. And so when the code enforcement people go back out, their standard is going to be 100% compliance, or we're moving forward with the court process. And so once we get to the court process, they come to the magistrate's office and they file a complaint. If the magistrate finds that there's probable cause for their complaint, then the court issue that starts the process in court is service. And that's where the complication starts to get bogged down. Because until we effect service, we cannot move forward on that case. All right, and so we gave you 100 cases. You'll find that of those 100 cases, even though they are some of the top violators as designated by the code enforcement team, you'll find that one of the overarching complications in those cases is process of service. And so until we get process of service, there is no court involved. There's no court involved. Not for real. We have to stop until we perfect that. Once, yes.
Process of service?
Until an APO certified officer serves the owner of that property with the documents officially. That's what service is. That's process of service. That's how you start any lawsuit.
Gotcha.
But the problem with this is a criminal complaint. All right, and because it's a criminal complaint, an APO certified officer has got to be the one to perfect service. That's very important. This is not a civil complaint. The APO certified officer has to serve it because we can give these people jail times and fines. All right, so when we don't go through that process, we've got constitutional issues with that. We're gonna have problems moving forward. So we have to do that. But once perfected, can you go forward, please? Keep going to the court side. Yes. Okay. Once perfected, once the matter is officially served, then we have the whole panoply of issues available to us, a whole menu of options available to us. Next slide. We can, once they fail, once they are served, they come in with all the constitutional rights that anybody in a criminal case has. And that is show up and they can either plead not guilty or they can plead guilty. The majority of them come in and say, I'll take care of it. That's what we see over and over again. Citizens come in and they say, I'll take care of it. And so the resolution from the prosecutor's standpoint is to give them time to resolve it because they're willing to plead guilty. We normally call that a deferred prosecution. All right? That doesn't mean you can't have fines. It doesn't mean you can't have other consequences, but we give them time to resolve the issue. When they do not agree and we have to go to trial, well, it's set on the trial docket like any other case is set. We come in, we have a trial. If they're found to be guilty of the offense, then we still have the same menu of issues. Can you go forward? We still have the same, they're entitled to legal representation because jail is an option. If they're indigent, then we have a responsibility to offer them indigent representation because, again, their liberty may be deprived. And once we get to the court, all the trial options that are normally available are available. Next slide. Of course, we can give them up to a $500 fine, 180 days in jail, and any other terms and conditions to resolve the code violation. And that last one is important because what we want is for the code violation to not continue. And that's why we think it's so crucial that we put an educational component in addition to the $500 fine and if there's some jail time, some jail time, so that we can abate the continuing problem. So how are we going to do that? Next slide. City attorney just told us she's creating a team of lawyers who are going to concentrate on prosecuting these cases. That's going to be critical in us moving a lot of cases forward. Not only that, we're going to the code violation or code enforcement team is going to create for your purposes a dashboard that's going to list all of the problems that we have in the community. They're going to start rolling through and putting the violations out publicly so you can have access to them and know which ones are in violation and what their status is from day to day. We're also going to cooperate with OPI for a robust education program so that people understand that there's a greater emphasis on these cases and that they will be met with strict accountability at the court. We also have a pilot program for e-filing the cases to improve efficiency. And in addition to that, one of the things that I think has been complicating for our neighborhood association folks is they show up in court because they know a case has been set, but when they get there, they're frustrated because they find that there's been no service on the case. And so our magistrates are going to change the process wherein we won't set a case on the docket until we have service perfected. And that way we lower expectations from the community because we have not been able to perfect service yet. we have a status in our computer system where we can do that, hold the case in abeyance. And once the prosecution determines that service has been perfected, then they file a motion to set the case on the docket to move forward. Yes.
I guess
See-
my question is, why haven't we done that before? Because that's what they do in circuit court and district court. Literally, you really can't move forward without perfecting service.
I can't answer why we haven't done that process before. I can't, because we use the same process that we use in other misdemeanors in court, and that works fine for us. But most misdemeanors now, those people have been arrested going in. This is one of those rare situations, Counselor, where you have a group of code enforcement officers who come in, they identify an issue, and that creates the criminal problem. And then we have to go out and identify the owner of the property in order to file a criminal complaint against them. That doesn't happen in most misdemeanor cases. In fact, you know that most misdemeanor cases they have to be on you arrested. So we have to see them committing the offense, and that's why we don't have the same process for it.
I guess I'm just surprised that we're just now coming to this, but I think it's a great idea, so.
Okay, I don't know why we haven't been there before. This is the process that's always been used for it, and it's been effective up until this point, but we think that changing the process is going to help us out. I don't know that that's going to, we still have the problem of perfecting service, even at that point. So to your point, simply because we don't put it on the docket doesn't mean service has been perfected. We still got to find the person.
Okay, hold on, I think, Councilor Tate, did you get your question? Is that, did you get your answer?
And then I'm sure I'm about to say what I'm about to say.
No, well, I think for us to say that this process has worked in the past, is the whole reason we're here today is because this is not working.
What part, Counsel?
The entire process is not working, which is why we're here today. The council is not thrilled about the way code enforcement is going, so this isn't a meeting to talk about how great our process is. This is a meeting for us as a council to figure out where it is broken. And I think that there's a lot of areas that I think that when we talk about these things that we bring question to. For example, when do y'all issue warrants when someone does not show up for court on this? If they've been served.
If they've
If
been
they've been
served.
served,
Yes.
y'all do issue a warrant.
We do.
Okay, so 100% of the time there's a warrant issued if someone's been served and they do not show up.
If we can validate that they've
How
been served.
Wait a
often
minute, Councilman, allow him to answer the question. Allow the judge to answer.
he said if they've been validated.
Yeah, I just-
Okay, so how often do we go out and fulfill those warrants?
That's a police function. The court doesn't do that. Once the warrant is, the FTA is validated by the court, it's entered into the system, and it's up to the law enforcement to arrest people. That's not a court function.
Yes, Chief.
So, Madam President, Councilor, I think to your question, a part of what we want you to see is this effort is something we've not had, which is coordinated code enforcement. So what we noticed, it's probably been within the last year and a half before Mr. Willis took over his role, was that code enforcement from a department standpoint lied in two different departments. So I know it's very easy to say, well, why has this process not been in place? Some of it has just been, as a city, what we've done. And there have been elements of that process that are effective. What we've noticed is it hadn't been coordinated between the court, planning, engineering permits, the Office of the City Attorney, and BPD. So that's what their charge has been. So what you're receiving now is an update of how they try to coordinate those efforts. Is it complete? Is it all the way complete? No, I don't think the goal is to tell you that the process is perfect. It is to show you this is how we're moving to ensure that all of those individual departments are now working together and where we're elevating to. So,
Chief, have we ever served one warrant on anyone from that has been an FTA?
Yes, sir, we have. And I put an 88-year-old woman in jail about that. We've done it. We have served them.
So, okay, so we do know that we served. So it's not just a police function, we actually know that this is happening. So on that point, I still don't understand, going back to why BPD cannot be issuing the citation to begin with, so we're not tasked with this serving issue.
So I heard you.
I didn't hear, could you repeat?
Why is BPD not on the beginning issuing the citation so that we don't have to do this, wait for this service? And then for the next 180 days, each of our offices get overwhelmed with calls during this period of non-compliance before any action is even taken.
Yeah, so that's what I noted earlier, that was a fair ask. And unfortunately, the process has been siloed. That's something that I think the team should go back and vet, because that's a fair recommendation.
But there's also a problem with that. BPD didn't have the authority on a citation to issue this violation. This violation of the code has to come through a complaint file by the enforcement division. BPD hadn't been able to issue that violation. That's part of the problem. Now, we can change those processes to make it so, but of course, that's another something on the BPD pile of things that they have to do.
Which is to your point about a BPD code enforcement division.
That would be a
Like,
great
that's a
idea.
fair recommendation. That's what I'm saying. That's not something that exists, but that's a fair recommendation to add to this process. That's the benefit of the departments coordinating now.
Chief, I've recommended it every single year since I've been on this council.
Who has?
One of the things that
It's
just
like a
happened.
broken record.
One of the things that just happened in the legislature, you may be aware of this, is that some cities that do not have full-time judges have, municipal courts have the ability to use the big ticket now to write violations. It just passed. And I think through local legislation, we may be able to make some of these violations applicable to that, so these police officers can go out and cite them on the big ticket. We did some of it during COVID. Some of the things that we normally would not be able to write on the citation, we could do during that time because of the emergency orders that the governor had. That's something I think we should probably explore that will, I think, speed this process up a lot.
Councilor Woods.
Right, so my question was back to the service piece. What is that? Is there like a backlog as far as those APO certified folks being able to get out and basically serve people? Or wait, is that because it sounds like that's a holdup in your process somewhere?
It is, Council.
So I'm trying to get a understanding of the scope of like how many people need to be served versus how many we're able to serve a day, or like what that breakdown is specifically. Because I think you call them summons officers, they reside in OCA.
Well, that is our goal, to get two
Oh, so that's
officers.
not a thing right now?
No.
Okay,
No.
so who serves right now?
No one. The service that comes through the code enforcement officers. They were one. And let me tell you what we discovered in this process, that your code enforcement officers were once APO certified. And because they were APO certified, they were allowed to do the service. But over time, attrition has come, and those APO certified officers are no longer working in code enforcement. And so what we need to do is put that back in place through budget, so that someone can be in code enforcement that is also APO certified. I think we might have one left, but it's just over time. I think that's probably what I'm trying to say, that it's the system that has over time through attrition changed this process. And since we've identified these issues, we now, I think, can change those issues and move forward with a better operating system.
So what exactly is happening now?
What's happening now is we're getting service through certified mail in those areas that people will accept certified mail, but you know how well that works in certain areas. People don't receive certified mail, or they'll pick it up and say it's them, but they will write on it that they didn't receive it. That's tenuous at best.
Okay, so they accept certified mail, and then y'all can move forward.
We can move forward with it in service.
And in-court service as well.
Well, like, I mean, so I guess our frustration, I'm calm, 100%. Our collective frustration is more, because like I said, we get all these complaints and issues, and we are, sending them to code enforcement. We've asked for like additional code enforcement personnel, but, kind of get told that we have sufficient personnel code enforcement. And we're basically like, there's no issue, but we're getting the call, we're trying to push these issues up. Once we push it up, we don't really see where it goes from there. We don't see how anything gets resolved. Because like, once we turn it in, now, we'll say my 311 app, has helped kind of have some level of visibility, but once it gets to a certain point, we just, like, we don't know, and just being able to get that visibility. Because that's news to me, I didn't know we didn't have, anybody able to do that right now. But I guess does anybody have an idea of like what that's, like how many, items or complaints are sitting there that need to have processed, served, and get my terminology right for protein.
I wouldn't have a venture guess on that, I would say that if you,
Well, I mean, those are things like, and I'm just talking, man, but like I said, we'll reach out and ask for information, and then we kind of get treated like, you don't need to worry about that, it's fine, and then eventually, like, you find out that it's just not. But like, just having some visibility on, how many things have been reported, or how many complaints are stuck in which phase. And I think this council has been one that has been, we've worked together well as far as not running out, just making anybody look bad, or throwing information out there in that way. So I would like to be able to have that kind of information so we can manage expectations in our districts. Because like I said, we're answering the same questions over and over again, passively maybe, but, we're not getting anything resolved. Even some of these, like, well, I said some of these two in District 1,
Let's get it.
so it's kind of a gap, like, just between, where the case stopped and got picked back up again. And there's just a lot of areas we don't have any visibility on. I think we were realizing kind of the need, to kind of have it, especially like with the judges and knowing like what's coming through each judge's courtroom, like what the results were, just having an idea, because like we're appointing everybody and just have no visibility into like who's doing a good job. Like I've got complaints about those, have no clue, like, so we haven't done a good job just being aware of like top to bottom all the judges. So we talked about some kind of reporting, of just being able to see, and that could probably be yearly type thing, maybe twice a year, but just how many cases came through this judge's courtroom, this is what happened. We don't necessarily have to have a name, but just knowing like how this got resolved, did this case ever get heard, did it get kicked down the road? But yes, I think, frustration, I don't think it's aimed at anyone particularly, but it's just, a lot of these conversations have been had, and we've kind of been told we got, like, it's good, and, like, specifically, like, beefing up code enforcement from a personnel point of view, and, kind of being told we were good.
well, I hear everything you're saying, and I know you say it's not aimed at anyone, but when you say all in the same conversation, we want to evaluate the judges and their appointments, but this process is multifaceted. And so we're going to be judged just on code violations, are we also going to be judged on DUIs?
Well, so,
and drug cases?
let me say this though, I do want to say, because I think, and I don't know if I started this, but the request was solely around judges. I think the code enforcement conversation merged with it and kind of ran. But I mean, it's all the same umbrella. It speaks to the same point. We do make the point. We need to know and have feedback on. I think we learned a lot through some things with some other boards and agencies and things that we appointed. Just the need to be a lot more in tune with what's happening, because when something happens, we're a little more on the hook for some of those things and stuff.
When we initially heard this problem, the first thing we did was come out to give you, and what you have in front of you is more information. You got when the case was filed, you got how long the case has been filed, you got how many inspections has been on the property, you got when the case was filed in court, whether or not there's service in court. We've given you a complete snapshot of the case as we know it. The complication I have now, I'm point right here, but I don't generate any of this.
Yeah.
I only receive it. The judges only receive it, the court. In fact, if we started talking about individual cases in here, it would put me in an ethical bind to hear that information outside of the courtroom. That's the complication we have. I can stand here, I think, as a department head and talk about these issues. But I'm going to be fair and just as a judge. Hearing this information outside the courtroom creates problems for me and for Judge Billy, who's right there. We have been, I can't talk about how you define success or not success on a particular docket. I can tell you that this whole code violation, filing complaints is a multifaceted problem, and it's not on any one group's shoulders. But I think there's some complication in thinking that all of it dovetails with inaction at the court. And what I'm suggesting to you is sometimes it never even gets to the court. It's never at the court for us to do anything, and yet we are held responsible for a process that never gets it there served properly.
Got several questions for Judge. Councilor Tate.
I just got a couple of questions, Judge. As I'm sitting here reviewing this report, I do see a lot of attempts have been made through certain searches to find out. How do we engage like elderly people? Because a lot of times when these people are elderly, been in their homes alone, of course, dementia, all of the above set in. Are we making an effort to find like the next of kin or engaging like maybe a social worker to engage that elderly person?
That's my recommendation, but I can't make that happen from the court. That's my point. Once it gets in front of me, I can use all the resources I have at the court to help. But until it officially gets in front of me, I can't do anything without stepping outside the purview of the court. So we have social workers who can help at that point. I want to say we have a motto at the court is accountability first, but with compassion.
Right.
So we hold folks accountable, but we simply take all those other factors into consideration.
Because when people get older, of course they become what I call a hoarder. And again, you may have an old person that's a hoarder that's deteriorating in age, where they think it's okay for their house to look like this or their yard to look like this, and then you have these people that are renting these structures. And so are we making any effort to contact the people that they're renting from to get them engaged in this process to assist you guys with trying to give them service? I'm sure if somebody is renting a structure, that they pay their rent every month. So they listening to somebody when they give them people they rent check. And so, just really just trying to engage and figure out a way that, the council, how we can engage and help you guys. Because I have a little situation, not really far from my house, where, the house was, everything on the street looked good with this particular house. But we were able to get that house cleaned up. And I can show you proof today where that house has been taken care of.
I think we came in with the expectation that there were going to be two situations that we show you. One is a best practice on how it should work, and then one that's been calling fits forever. We didn't get there, and I think one of the complications is the city attorney thinks that we start using names that's going to create problems for us, and I understand that. But to summarize the process, multiple agencies got involved in it, and within 60 to 90 days, the place had been shut down, had resolved, and is moving in a positive way because there was multi-systemic cooperation, which is, I think, what we're talking about here. In the other situation, there is a consistent violator who is confronted, straightens it out, and goes right back to the same problem. And so it's how do we address those situations over and over again? So we hold them accountable. And then the code enforcement people go back out there after he's been held accountable and the situation has deteriorated again back to the same process. Those are the situations I think that give y'all as council fits, because from the public's perspective, nothing's happened. But from our perspective, we've held them as accountable as we can hold them under the circumstances. It's going to take a bigger multi-systemic process in order to get them straight. I'm not telling you that we've done everything right. I'm telling you, we're trying to get it right. And I think getting it right with process and people, we gotta try people. We gotta hire some people who can go in and help to resolve some of these issues and put some systems back in place, I think, that we once had. I think it's gonna help us get through this problem.
Chief, you had motion.
Yes, ma'am, Counselor. So, Counselor Wood's point, his question was helpful to me because I heard Counselor Wood say that I think that the conversation expanded from a request for judges in the court to kind of share their thoughts, and that's the reason why you have the various departments that are represented. It's also why I know that Counselor Williams, that some of the recommendations that you made, I know you said, well, I've made those. This organized process now, I think, helps to ensure that there's not that gap moving forward. I heard you say it too, Counselor Smitherman. So I think what would be helpful, I'll take back to the mayor that it was really two things. It was an update from the judges from the court side, but also I do think there's probably a benefit to the staff drilling down on the process before it ever even gets to the court, for you all to hear that piece too, that there's adjustments being made to that portion of the process. And I think that's why it was all pulled together, but it was helpful to hear you say that this was really more kind of update from the court side. So I'll take that back to the mayor, Madam President, and councilors on the process piece.
Counselor Moore and then Counselor Burton.
Gotcha. Thank you, Madam President. And so you all may have stated this already, but I was trying to figure out, it sounds like, you know, everybody just needs to be able to figure out how to get more APO certified officers in place. So what do we need to do that? Because I'm sitting here with 20 cases, some of which have been reported, others have not, that, residents have brought to my attention. And so trying to figure out how to go about getting this rectified, because I'm seeing right here where, there's one person that has 3 environmental cases. Like I got 2 people with 3 environmental cases, and I'm pretty sure there are more in my district, that have the same situation. And I know, we talk about repeat offenders, and how do we, rectify them when they, come, they change, or they, comply like they need to, and then they go right back to doing what they were doing before. I know with the Public Improvement and Beautification Committee, people who are trying to renovate a property, right? Like they have to come before us, every 30 or so days to give us a report on what they're doing. And if they ever come before us and they have not done their part, then it's a mark against them, correct? Can the same process be put in place, for things such as this, where we put an ordinance in place that says, yes, you've come before us, multiple times for the same incident. You don't have the luxury of being able to take advantage of this process anymore, this 90-day process. Like, is that on us to put an ordinance in place to?
I don't even know if you have. Well, once we can secure appropriate service, the court's not going to allow them to be in that space anymore. And so they will be put in a place where they are on a regular compliance review. We've already, from the court, from the bench, instructed code enforcement when there's a violation of this type. If there is another violation, go out every day and file a new complaint. But you can imagine how labor intensive that is going to be. You'd almost have to put a code enforcement officer on one case. I mean, we have a plethora of options, but I think, yes, sir, to your point, we can make them be on a continuing review so we can identify whether they stay in compliance.
So I guess the only other question is, like, what do we need to do then in terms of just getting more APO certified individuals?
That's what I was going to speak to. So that's a staffing matter. That's an administration matter, and that's what we'll take back to the mayor. But the council's pleasure is that we beef up that number, because that's really more about units and budgeting. So I made a note of that too, council.
One other issue associated with that, Chief, is that we're also going to reestablish something we thought was really successful a few years ago, and that was having remote environmental reports in the communities, which is another staffing issue. That's a staffing issue because we're using the same staff, so we need more personnel. If we're going to be sending them out in north, south, east, and west, and having remote environmental report sessions so that the members of the community can come out and see what's going on, we think that's going to be really effective. It was effective for us when we were doing it. We had better compliance, and we think more personnel can help us get there.
Thank you. Counselor Burton.
So that just made me think, if do you think it'll be hard for you to find more attorneys to help run the virtual court then?
It's not gonna be virtual, it's gonna be in person. It's not the attorneys. The attorneys would come from OCA. I need clerks.
Okay, clerks.
I need clerks, yes.
Well, have you thought about going to the law schools of people who are studying for the bar, or people who may have, not passed on first time or say for second time to do them?
I would love to use anybody who's available. We're having the same issues in hiring personnel
Right.
that everybody else is having.
Personnel board.
It's a personnel board issue in terms of us getting people, just in terms of our day-to-day functions, hiring people. I don't know if you are abreast of it, but that's a continuing issue in hiring people.
Madam President, Madam Pro Tem, so that's a matter that the mayor has been walking pretty intimately with the personnel board. The challenges of the onboarding and people meeting the minimum qualifications is not as simple as just identifying people and saying, we need you for this resource. So he's been walking pretty closely with them, as we have with him, but that's an option that they've expressed that they would explore if we can get PBJC approved.
Okay, and I wouldn't be a good colleague if I didn't say code enforcement was one of our top 5 things for the budget. And so we're hearing from Judge Sparks, we've heard from public counselors, and we're asking, I know you guys are having problems with filling the code enforcement officer positions that you already have, but it's really almost another request that we put more money in there. Or if we could train almost every code enforcement officer that we have and come in to be APOs. Is it possible, or can you ask the mayor if that's possible?
Yes, we can.
And then I guess my question is, I may be wrong, can we ask the sheriff deputies to help us with that service?
So for us, we've explored many options. And so for us, the best way would be for OCA to secure 2 APO certified officers. You all know that we receive funding from the opioid litigation that can go towards looking at drug nuisance properties. So for us, that's the easiest way. That could be a contract through OCA.
Okay, because I was just thinking about, regular cases, you have several methods that you can, I know it's different.
Correct, but I do want to let the council know we can't do it all. So I want to put that out there. This is a way to help and assist BPD, but I don't want it to be that OCA is taking this on because we don't have the staff or the capability to do all of this.
Yeah, because, most people don't know, like service, you sometimes have to hunt the person down, and you don't really have somebody that's committed or have different options, and we're going to keep having the same problem. So I guess that's just something for y'all to think about. And Attorney Menard, are there any ordinances you need to approve, like for those repeated offenders to increase the fine?
There's always some room, I guess I'll come up.
I think we're capped out at
We're-
$100
yeah.
180 days. That's the maximum fine that we can, impose for any violation.
So how many jail?
There's, the Julie Bernard, served office as city attorney. There's always, some improvement. We are looking, continually at ordinances and some things that we can do. I'm hearing some of the things that are being discussed, things that would make it easier to use the uniform non-traffic citation and complaint. Have some fines, there's some different ways things can go. They go to court. The maximum fine is $500, 180 days in jail. You can't put a corporation in jail, so they're limited to fining corporations. So that is streamlined. For most of the violations that we're talking about, that is the maximum fine that can be done. We can look at some different options with ordinances, yes.
You can do $500 a day.
Correct.
Yes.
It's fine, and that's what Judge was referring to in having documentation of the violation each day it continues, because a continuing violation, the fine is per violation per day that the violation continues, but that needs to be documented for the court. And that's why I say that would be labor intensive. You've got to, some of it may be concentrating on your primary issues because it is very labor intensive, but.
Well, that's why we did the 100 let's concentrate on those worst violations. Put all the manpower we can behind those violations think you'll start gaining momentum. Once you start resolving those issues, then people will start seeing that there is more consequences for what you do. And I think you'll start seeing more momentum from other people as well.
So my question is, a lot of Birmingham, and particularly on the west side, is Hispanic. And so do we have a liaison or somebody to translate some of these things in Spanish?
I mean, at the court.
At the court, OCA, wherever, because a lot of times they don't know because they don't speak English. I'm not saying this to be great, I mean, I know this for certain, like, we have a Hispanic neighbor who violates the code ordinance, but they don't speak English. So what do you do about that?
We have access to bilingual interpreters at the court that we use. In fact, we have a bilingual docket. All right, I can tell you, Counselor, it's very hard retaining translators on that docket. We do it, and we've had 5 or 6 in the last year that we've had to deal with. Keeping someone in place is hard, but we do make sure we have people available because I believe it's a deprivation of their constitutional rights if we can't communicate effectively with them. Now, the other departments, I don't know if they have staff available to that. I would imagine they have to have someone available, but the city itself could probably hire a robust group of people to do interpretation.
HIPAA is already proposed, so.
We work with, we have a memorandum agreement with HIPAA and have worked with them for years. And that's who we went to for our translators, but we haven't always been able to get translators from HIPAA.
Okay, because I know like in my district, that's a top complaint from my neighborhood officers are the Hispanic residents and making sure that they know about it. So it's just something to keep in the back of your minds.
Our primary relationship with HIPAA has been through our domestic violence program, making sure we had someone in there. We worked with them for years.
Okay, I'm looking at your bill, I should be looking at PP and OCA for that.
Councilors, if we would allow, Councilor Quinn has asked a series of questions, then I'll come back to both of you.
You know, try and stay constructive. I do have to just point out that I was here 5 years ago when the mayor called everyone who had a piece of the code enforcement problem into this room, and he came in and asked a question, you know, when was the last time that you all had been called into this room and talked to each other? And there were people in this room who've been in city government for decades, and not one hand went up. So that's kind of where we come from. I'm, you know, just a little disappointed that it's taken us 5 years to get this far. I give you some pandemic credits. But, in any case, it's been painfully slow. Coming back to the point about budgets and money, this is, from my perspective, this is not a money question at all. I'm looking over at the police department and I'm seeing millions of dollars of funded positions for sworn police officers that are vacant. So, from my perspective, they have an abundance of resources to address the financial component of this. So I'm not inclined to put another dollar, you know, towards a financial solution. I mean, we have bought, over the years, we have bought equipment for our code enforcement officers. You know, we went from a clipboard system to supposedly now all of our code enforcement officers have the capacity to enter those complaints on a tablet and put the images and everything in an electronic record. So I feel like the council, you know, has done everything that we've been asked to do from a financial perspective. What's happening here today is that we're just trying to, you know, hold the folks who are responsible for actually carrying out this task. We're trying to hold y'all accountable, and ultimately that's what this meeting is about from my perspective, right?
Thank you. Councilor Tay?
Yeah, Attorney King, so the two A-post positions that you're referencing, they'll be through the Jefferson County Personnel Board, correct?
So there's one of two ways. One, through the Jefferson County Personnel Board, and they will have to report that are APOS certified through a contract.
Okay. So you just have to meet the Alabama Peace Officer Standards requirements.
That's correct.
Okay.
Councilor Moore?
Yeah. I guess to Councilor McQuinn's point though, like if we do have vacant, positions in BPD, could that be used for those positions?
OCA is welcome to any police officers that we can get, if they're
If it
available.
resides in BPD,
Now, we're trying to house these two officers under OCA, and they will be working throughout the day through the court system and through our drug nuisance abatement team with supervision under the chief of police. But they will be housed in OCA so that we can see and monitor what is going on every day.
Gotcha, okay. Only other question I had was, I know Councilor Quinn brought up the fact that it's $500 that could be fined a day. Is that, all we can do is the $500 and then, the 180 days in jail? Okay, and the only reason I ask is because I know I'm looking at, somebody who's an out-of-town investor in like a Tennessee, right? Who finding them $500 a day probably won't do much. And I'm trying to see what we would need to do to escalate that to possibly, not impounding, so forgive me for the wrong terminology, but pretty much taking on that property. Because otherwise it will just sit there and, be an eyesore, and I'll continue to get complaints about it. So
I want to remind the council that in conjunction and collaboration with municipal court, some of those cases where you have out-of-state defendants that are hard to get served in municipal court, it's easier on the DNAT side, especially if there's drug nuisances accompanied with those properties, that we bring those on to the circuit court where there's stiffer penalties. Remember, anywhere between $500 up to $50,000. So I just want you to be mindful, we are moving and shifting some of those high-level cases to circuit court, the ones that we can.
got you. Well, I guess, was it a reason why it wasn't already shifting? Is that?
Well, remember, we have manpower and we have challenges with the personnel board that we're overcoming as well. So we're expanding our team, but of course, that does take time to do so.
So,
Go ahead, Councilor.
Judge, my question that I asked earlier, when you identify residents that are renters, do you engage the company that they're renting from? Because it may put some heat, up on the people.
Engage the company.
Okay,
That's the appropriate owner, not the renter.
okay. That's what I wanted to know, because if I'm renting and then I'm in code enforcement, I was just, that was just, since you already doing that, I think that will put some heat up under the person that's renting the property to move a little faster.
I think
To
code
rectify the
enforcement can
problem.
probably speak more to how they engage those owners, but it's not the renter that comes into
The owner.
Councilors, any other questions? Councilor?
Yeah, just a couple real quick. The top 100 thing, that's something that's being worked on, or that's something y'all are sending out?
We asked the code enforcement team to identify, and it would be one that would continue to turn. As we clear one, they will continue to put them on. And that's the purpose of putting a dashboard, that public-facing dashboard out there.
I just want to make sure I didn't miss that come out, and then I guess all of the adjustments and additions and personnel adds, like all of those things are reflected in this budget request, proposal. Like, well, I think you got an option that may be outside of general, or parts, so I guess that's a no on those two.
You're asking if we put those budget requests?
Well, like any of these solutions that are for adjustments to improve this, that we're talking about today, are those things reflected in the budget proposal, that we're considering now?
Chief,
You mean,
what would, you understand?
yeah, so I'm trying to see, for their individual departments, I'm trying to make sure I understand what you're asking, Council.
So I just thinking back, I know we heard about like 2 APO certified summons officers. I think there was a dashboard, and some other things as far as code enforcement side, but just those things that kind of we're bringing to the table as possible aids or solutions. Do we have a plan? Are they already funded in this proposal, or is there some other funding that's already in place to?
So for some of them, like for what Madam City Attorney, she looked at that up, that there is space for those APO certified officers to be available if approved by the mayor. But funding would be available for them. It's really more of priority by the mayor and the administration with BPD among their others. That's why I said that was a fair request, and I'll take that back to him.
All right, so last thing was just more so, just to say, like, when it comes to like code enforcement violations, we kind of get into those like egregious infractions, but like, I think it's more so, I guess when I'm talking about code enforcement and why I think like more manpower is needed, because I think they should just be able to go through the districts or communities and just kind of see things. And so, you know, you got the people that got toilets and stuff in the front yards, but it's the people that like just started parking on the grass this week, or they just started having an issue. And if we can kind of get to them, hey, this is not acceptable, correct this, and kind of get it corrected with just one person versus now they've been parking there for 6 months, the grass is dead, they had a second car there, now the neighbor a few houses down is kind of, and so that it just kind of spreads, so just kind of like seeing some regular issues kind of hit code enforcement that are not, well, I guess I'll vent a little bit, in my spirit of Hunter. But, so like, I almost feel like we get, in our offices get turned into like deputized code enforcement offices, and so, like, that's a lot of stuff I would, you know, really like to be spending my time, team style on doing, but we end up like chasing down violations, taking pictures, and turning them in and having to check on them, and so, like, we're kind of stuck, I mean, you know, this is not the way we want, well, not the way I want to use that time, so, I probably got all kinds of pictures of potholes and, you know, cars in the yard and buckets and barrels and there's all kind of stuff, and which, you know, I don't want to do it, but I don't mind, but if we're gonna do it, we definitely want to be able to follow the process out and cut close the loops. But yes, it's the minor things as well, not just focusing on the major things, you know. You stand there, but code enforcement is not all yours. Leadership just look like a leader.
And Judge, I hope you, and I know, Council, you want to go, I hope you understand, this council is very process driven. And so, and we want the information, because everyone's coming to us for this information. And how many times, I mean, I'm looking at my heavy offender here, I probably have pictures in both cameras, in both phones, where I've taken pictures, put those, you know, recorded those, and some of these, you may even know my address, because I've talked about it so much. So, it's the transparency, I believe, that would help us to better understand, and just the reporting of this. This information is valuable, but on a more consistent basis. And now, what can we do with it? Of course, we can't go to court. We're not the judge. We're not that judicial side. We're not even the administrative side, where the money is going to be put in there. But I want everyone to understand the voices that are talking to you today. We want this type of action from both sides so that we can at least have a better understanding or expectation of what's going to happen as a result of this. Because right now, it looks like we're just providing information. You've got your staff that's providing the information, but what are those tangible results? And I also want to piggyback on what Councilor Tate said. I'm hoping that we can get creative. You know, we've seen things in drug court. We've seen, trying to think of the other courts, we've been very creative in how to sort of tackle the root cause of the problem of the offender. So you've done a very good job with that. But we all know when you got this 88-year-old resident that's living in that house by herself, and we start talking about 500 a day fines, we start talking about 180 days in jail, how many of you gonna still be sitting at this table? Because you're gonna, we've gotta do something to address that type of resident that's in that cycle as well. But the information I've been receiving, is if it's all people from out of state, a lot of it is corporations. So that if we got this kind of information, we could further assess it ourselves and be able to know how to, education is key for our residents as well. If they could have some understanding of, here's this issue you've been bringing to me, and here's the report or the results that we're getting back from it. So it gives them a level of expectation.
I feel like you've heard us say this over and over again, we need an educational campaign. And, it's something my dad said about us, we're the closest to the people. Like, they can touch us. They can't really touch you for real, Chief or Judge Stark. So we're the ones that have the answers to them. And we have to be able to explain it, because that's a part of the problem too, they don't understand. Whether they were violators or they're just being nosy neighbors. So I guess this is just a repeated request, will you help us to get this education sooner than later? Because if we don't, and Council advocates talk about that all the time, it's a compliance issue, right? Because if we don't enforce this, then people are gonna continue to think the city's a joke. That's what they think, we're a joke, code enforcement.
Councilor Abbott, has spoken, and come back to you, Councilor Weaver.
Thank you. Well, I've been uncharacteristically quiet about this issue because I've been here since the beginning of the earth and nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. We still complain about the same stuff 21 years later that we were complaining about 21 years ago. And I appreciate the fact that this administration is finally paying attention. I appreciate that. But when I looked at the 24 budget and saw no more personnel for code enforcement, no more personnel for public works, which is the number 2 biggest complaint we get, I just thought, I don't even want to approve this budget, because it's not addressing the things that we have complained about over and over and over and over. We just keep on complaining and nobody listens. And, maybe you're ticked off. Well, I'm ticked off because I'm going to come to the end of my time at City Hall and we're still not going to have accomplished anything because we used to have these guys called green codes. We're all too old to remember that because Arrington got rid of them. And they were code enforcement people who drove the streets of Birmingham. And I guess they must have been A-Post certified because they could write citations and they could nab people. We just have such a convoluted system that it seems that no one really gives a hoot about it, or it wouldn't be so screwed up. But bureaucracies are known for doing what they've always done because that's the way it's always been done. And you can get out your violin and play some sad music. And so I'm happy, believe it or not, to see that we're doing something, or at least we're talking about doing something. But I think this council, this council has one little bit of power. And that is, we cannot pass the budget if we don't see the things being addressed that we think are important. And all the enforcement, zoning enforcement, code enforcement, housing, all these things, that's, we get nailed every time we go to a neighborhood meeting. Has anybody ever been to a neighborhood meeting where you didn't get nailed by people because we're incompetent, we don't do anything, we can't make anything happen, can you just call them and make them do this? I can't call anybody and make anybody do anything. So, that and the public works issue with the trash and brush just makes me insane. So, I'm just going to be quiet, but I'm telling you, I'm thinking about the fact that our priorities that we keep on reiterating over and over and over are just kind of brushed to the side, and we're doing all the glitzy things that are so cool, and Well, I'm sorry. You know, I'm tired of cool. I would just like for some things to get done so that the residents who constantly rag me about not doing anything, about some names that I could name, but I'm not going to, you know, people that just won't do right. Well, I think, couldn't we just put them in the city jail? It's pretty nasty, and they should have a really miserable time there. We bought a new freezer, maybe we could put them in it. You know, it's just, you know, the city looks inept. And it's embarrassing when people say, well, I moved out of Birmingham because it was such a rat hole, and I moved to Homewood where they make people conform with the law. That hurts my feelings. I want to live in a city where things at least have an appearance of being done right and competently. And it just, you know, after 21 years, I look in the mirror and say, we hadn't made much difference here because everything's still the way it was. But now this administration is looking at this, and I'm looking for change, but I'm also looking for someone to explain to me how this budget is going to improve the code enforcement problem, the enforcement problem in general, and how it's going to address the public works issue of trash and brush being picked up once a month, which is just totally unacceptable. I just can't take it anymore. If I look at one more mattress and one more sofa and one more house's entire contents thrown out on the street for a whole month, I'm going to explode. And then you won't see me anymore. Now, Hunter, top that.
Councilor Williams.
Valerie, to your point, I agree with you that we have one inch of power, and I'm very willing to also vote no on this budget until code enforcement is fixed. One thing that I have repeatedly asked for outside of the A-post officers and BPD, and I want to go ahead and put it on the table since it is of this topic, is that we do what other major cities do across the U.S., and they almost all do the same thing. They utilize their 311 system where every individual household gets an opportunity to have bulk trash pick up once a month. And they schedule that with 311, and then the routes are optimized by sector within the city. Atlanta, Nashville, Dallas, everywhere does it. It has large cities and has the same bulk trash problem so that they will not sit their bulk trash out for 30 days until the next opportunity. They also have an enforcement piece on the back end where if you do not schedule with 311, or their version of it, but most of it actually is 311 in each city, then a citation is issued. Of course, their citations are issued by a post person or post personnel depending on the state, and there's a fine associated. So I just want to go ahead and so since I have been asking for that one thing about having code enforcement within BPD, I want to very publicly say I'm asking that we transfer our process to be a scheduled 311 pickup with citations for those that do not schedule, because I also am very tired of everyone's bulk trash sitting out literally the day after pickup, and since pickup is not uniform in date, you kind of understand why that happens. So, anyway, I have a question. On one slide presented by Ms. King and one slide presented by Judge Sparks, one said 30 to 60 days to fix in court, and one said 45 to 90 days to fix in court. So which, is it 45 to 90, or is it 30 to 60?
That's just an example of what our prosecution team recommends.
Okay, so, but before they get to court is how many days? Because you mail them a certified summons, so if they elect to say that they got the mail, which, alright, and they show up to court, how long is that process from the date that the inspector was out and the date of their court date?
I'll let Attorney Lee Powell, who is our environmental court prosecutor, answer that question.
That actually is,
Stand up, Lisa, they can hear you.
if they're served, they already have a date on that summons. So that would be determined by the magistrate. As soon as they get to court though, we handle it. I cannot tell you what the time frame is. Magistrate, it's totally up to them what date they put on that summons.
Who's the magistrate under?
It's gonna be 30 to 45 days because our dockets are set so far in advance. So it's not like we can put it on an immediate docket.
So, okay, so we have 45 days until they show up in court, and then we have 45 additional more days to 90 days for them to fix whatever the code violation is.
But that's not every time. Because sometimes if it's simply overgrown yard, we might tell them, have it done in 30 days. Come back and tell us. And the only reason we give them 30 days is because of our dockets already set. And so it depends on what the violation is. There is no one size fits all for every code violation because it depends on what the problem is. If it's just overgrown yard, then we'll give them a shorter time frame. But if they've got housing issues where they got to do repairs around the house, then sometimes 30 days is not going to be sufficient for them to secure a contractor or somebody who can do it for them to get the repairs done if they can't do it themselves. So it's hard for me to say 30 days on every situation. We have to take that information from what code enforcement is giving us on how much time we give them to make the repairs. And I think that might help you. I understand, I understand. It might help you if, as we go forward, we give you the suggested time to make those repairs for them. And if they're in violation of that time, then we need to take some action from that point forward. I think giving you that information, that the court has now given them 45 days to make the repairs based on the recommendation, or 60 days to make the repairs based on the recommendation, because it's not going to be the same thing every time.
Okay, but I guess what's broken is that between the time that an inspector goes out, cites or writes them up or whatever we're calling this, because they're not, I don't know if we're calling it cite, but, and then the time that they have to fix it is so long that during that 90-day time frame, the public is outraged. And in other municipalities, if you go and drive in any municipality touching the city of Birmingham almost, you will not, if there is an issue at a residence, I assure you, any of our over the mountain communities or any of our North Jefferson communities are not giving 90 to 180 days to fix whatever the issue is. And so this system is innately broken if the shortest turnaround time is 30 days for grass plus 45 days of notice. Well, hell, that's summer's gone, and so it's going to be winter. I mean, like, the system that doesn't work, and that's why other municipalities don't do this. And so anyway, I hope that we can find a way where there is immediate action, and I don't see a way around that other than having APOS people issue actual citations immediately. So,
Council,
yes,
you don't mind, you do know a lot of those communities operate under housing covenants, where the individuals who live in those communities are required based on their housing association to keep their yards in a certain state of repair. We don't have those covenants around Birmingham, and I know in most communities. Now, if we could have some voluntary compliance with covenants like that, that's another discussion we can have. And then there's voluntary policing of that kind of activity. That gets the neighborhood association officers involved in the process, because that's what's happening in a lot of over the mountain communities. And that's why the police don't have a whole lot of environmental action, because they police themselves. Because they understand the value to their housing, to their own values. But I'm suggesting that perhaps as part of our educational process, certain communities could enact their own housing covenants and govern themselves accordingly.
absolutely not. So, and Judge, to your point as well,
I wouldn't say vote for it. I wouldn't say that. What I'm saying to you is, I don't know how much we get the public involved in it. We take all the heat in this room for all the yards. It's not just you, I get beat up in public too.
Yeah.
I get beat up in public when people go out because they tell me I don't do anything to people when they come down there. So it's not just you. But what I'm telling you is, I think the overarching problem that can be solved comes with education. It comes with education. Education lifts all the boats. Now, I've tried to put people in jail and make them stop using drugs. I've done it for 27 years. And I can tell you, nothing makes them stop using drugs. They get right here in their head, they're not going to use it. And that comes from education.
We're not talking about narcotics use, we're talking about code enforcement. And so, anyway, I think from an administrative standpoint that there needs to be a fix, because there's no way that, you know, every single thing if it takes 90 days to come in compliance is your shortest turnaround in a realistic sense, then we're not really doing anything, except for when we have these extremely egregious cases, and apparently those aren't even being served. So, you know, it's voluntary show up to court, and then it's voluntary compliance for some of these cases. And anyway, it was my understanding from the administration, and maybe I misunderstood, that everything was buttoned down with code enforcement, and that our issue was at municipal court, which is why, to my understanding, that this meeting is existing with our presiding judge. So that was my understanding. Maybe I misunderstood what's been told to us, but anyway, I'd like to make a motion that we ask the court to provide a list of cases in aggregate per judge and the outcomes, so not just code enforcement, but all cases, not identifying any individual defendant, but for all cases assigned to that judge, and what the outcome is for each of those cases.
6 months. Or 6 months.
I said every year.
Every year.
Second. So you have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the request?
So basically what we're doing is asking for performance data, you know, so outcomes.
Yeah, and listen, just like when Ms. Tate and I and whoever else is serving on public safety at the time, here, just because there's a 911 call to a business is not a bad thing. Just because something's adjudicated is not a bad thing. If there's a solution and it's adjudicated, it's a good thing. So, but we as a council, if we're in charge of appointment of municipal court, I think it's very fair that we get data on what's actually happening, because I am appalled that there have been, we said no cases are being currently served right now. Of all of our cases in all 9 districts, none are being served, and we didn't know about it. And that, to me, when we've been told everything is fine,
I think you misunderstood that, counsel. I think you misunderstood that. They're being served by certified men.
no, the people that we're having issues with are the ones that aren't doing this, aren't participating in the mail game. They're the ones that said, yeah, I ain't gotta show up. And so, those are the egregious people. Anyway, that's my motion.
Yes, Councilman Tate.
To Chief, and I heard, keep hearing Judge Sparks talk about the education component, which I highly agree with. When you have had people to constantly do, constantly be environmental violators. And when we are trying to bring people into compliance, so that is a teachable moment. So how can the administration engage all 9 districts with information to make sure that we doing, like when I go to neighborhood meetings, I want fact sheets where I'll be able to provide to the people that are showing up at the neighborhood meetings, and possibly giving them to those neighborhood presidents that are actively engaged in the neighborhood that may be driving around and probably can drop something in, you know, somebody's hand or what have we. Because I think when we're trying to bring people out of situations, and like Ms. Councilor Abbott said, this has been going on 20+ years.
50.
You know, we have to really reimagine, like, we gotta educate, you know, people, because we're trying to get people in that mind frame. So I'm going back to what Madam President said, and looking at some of these cases that I have, elderly individuals. Their health is probably declining. Think it's okay to be a hoarder, and it's not. And I heard the judge say that accountability factor, because I'm real big on accountability. But making sure that we engage every party, that even maybe be next to kin, or who is the caregiver, or somebody that may be going by there checking on that person every day. Because I think a lot of this can be rectified if we, you know, get ahead of it. You know, just get ahead of it. Or I don't want to haul an 88-year-old lady, you know, in jail. I mean, criminalizing somebody that may have onset dementia or health is declining. But think it's okay to be a hoarder, and it's really not, because they're really living in bad conditions.
Counselor, I'm just gonna detain you just for that thought for 1 minute, because we do have a motion on the table. And a second to get that, to request this information. So are there any other questions just about the motion?
Can you repeat the motion?
Yes.
It's been such a long time, I forgot. I might have early onset.
The motion is for the court to provide the council with a list of aggregate cases, not just code enforcement, but aggregate cases, and the just disposition of each case by judge.
Any questions?
And annually, not monthly, not, annually.
Ready for the vote? Question?
Just some additional, I guess, context around, I guess, by the time this gets to the next step, being able to build out, like, what that looks like in individual detail. As far as, like, what a report looks like.
So, what's
I
the
think you outlined
question?
it, because you said the judge.
By judge, type of case, aggregate,
And what
not
outcome.
identifying any particular case like this does, but judge, outcome, and, if they're acquitted or whatever due to compliance or adjudicated due to compliance, then that's great. If I say adjudicated due to compliance.
Yeah, we're not looking for,
Not looking.
we're not trying to send people to jail or fine them $500
Well,
a
there's a
day.
certain group I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, some people need to go to jail.
And everyone in this packet needs to sit in city jail.
Or the
So,
freezer.
I'm not saying that. I'm not on the record saying that.
So we got, do you have clarity, Counselor?
Yeah.
Will we call for the vote? Let's call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposers? All right, thank you. So that action will come out of this meeting, a committee of the whole, with that request to administration via the court.
Yeah.
I know. I know it's gonna come from the court, but, we're requesting it. Yes, all right, thank you. Judge Sparks, I know you had the summary of the next steps. Was there other information you want to share as part of this discussion?
Yes, I want to temper your expectations on this report, because of the way we operate at the court. We do specialized judges, which means you won't see a lot of cases of a certain type under a certain judge's name, because we believe in specialization and training and learning in that area. And so you might not see a lot of environmental court cases under my name, because I don't do that docket on a regular basis.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any expectation of that.
And maybe I misunderstood what we.
We just want to know the effectiveness of the court.
We're just trying to see what's coming through the courts, what's the action that's being taken, so that we can, and what's the outcome, so that we can have an understanding of what's being processed through
Yeah,
there.
we're not looking for the workload of
Correct.
individual judges.
Well, I guess you're doing because you said by judge.
Yes, because we do want to know what's happening by judge. So if the work, and very much so.
So if it's a specialty judge, you can just say that and not a particular
Would you like all the cases any case that judge?
Yep, every case, aggregate data.
Well, I'm asking this on a one-year basis. I mean, we're not asking you to bring it to us every quarter.
Correct.
What date would you like first report?
When do we, what judge? No, I'm, because.
We can clarify
Yeah, we
that.
can clarify the dates.
Every 4 years.
Full-time judges are appointed at 4-year terms, 2-year terms.
We'll clarify that before the next quarter.
A month.
Did you have anything else, Judge? I do have some comments from another counselor.
I don't have any, I think he said what we think the next steps are going to be. And what we do.
Counselor Pro Tem.
I guess it's more of a suggestion for administration PB. So it was myself, Carol Clark, and someone else. Is Alice in the room? Alice can speak to this more. We went to Vacant Abandoned Properties Conference in Peoria, Illinois. Has close to the same population as us. And their method don't really put people in jail. They do something like, okay, the code enforcement officer would go to the house saying, hey, something's wrong, here's how you fix it. They come back around, I don't know how many days, and the person would have completed this, and we have seen compliance significant amounts. And so I know our PLO team, Kim, has been in talks with them, so I hope this doesn't fall on deaf ears, because sometimes I do feel like our suggestions do, but I think that is a great way not to reinvent the wheel. Because if that's a town of our size, and Peoria is a pretty happy town, then we could just say, hey, what have you done? Can we see some of your material? Can we try to incorporate that? Because I think if we do that, they'll help us speed up the time for this educational campaign and make people feel like, we're not trying to put them in jail. Because if not, if they feel like that, they are going to be on our heads from election time on. So I just asked that request for us to get in contact with them. And I think I gave it to them. I actually have some of the material. So, and they also are having that same company, VAD, they're having a conference right now at Free Academy, you all can go, where they talk about code enforcement 101 best practices and the second day is tomorrow.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Judge, we want to thank you for providing us this information. I'm appreciative of the process and the information that you shared. I feel that those of us who are present, this has been a worthwhile opportunity for us to learn more and engage, and then left you with some action items that we feel will help us to move this process along. So Chief, you'll be sure to get that information to Mayor Woodfin.
Yes, ma'am.
And then that can help us as we process and continue to go through our review of the budget and different things.
Yeah, thank you all very much.
Thank you. All right, is there a motion to adjourn? Yes, Councilman.
One statement. So, I just want to be on public record saying this, that I wouldn't have done this for other councils, but with this council, I'm comfortable doing this. I am a no on the budget as well until I feel like all of us are sufficiently satisfied. That currently, I feel like the administration has addressed the number, the one financial concern that I brought to them. But I'm not going to be satisfied with the budget until, the issues that Councilor Williams and Councilor Abbott in particular have brought up. So I just want to go on record saying that I'll be following up with you guys to make sure that you're satisfied, and that's going to determine how I vote.
Thank you, Councilor.
Can I get a copy of this?
Yes, and, Chief, could we be sure to get a copy of the presentation?
Yes.
Thank you, Judge, for you to that.
Okay.
Thank you all, so we get a motion to adjourn.
No, to adjourn.
All those in favor? Thank you.